This is your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Very excited about today's show. I'm excited about all the shows, of course, but in particular, really enjoyed a couple conversations I had that I'm bringing to you today. Ryan Hartman from the Minnesota Wild will join me here in just a few minutes, talk about the season. He leads the team with 12 goals this year. Had some fun stories he shared and things like that. So just a really good conversation with Ryan Hartman that I'm excited to share with you guys here in just a little bit. And I talked to Marcus Fuller, Gophers men's basketball beat writer from the Star Tribune. 6-0 start for that team, and Marcus does a great job covering them and offers some really good perspectives on why this team is 6-0 and whether that's sustainable once they face better levels of competition here coming up very soon. So both those things coming up here in just a little bit. But first, what did I miss? Major League Baseball should have been a day of real celebration for the Twins on Wednesday, and it was early on. Byron Buxton introduced to the media fresh off of his contract extension, 7 years, $100 million plus incentives, and had some great, some real kind of next level for him in terms of his status on this team. Kind of stuff that came out of that, including how badly he wants to win a World Series, how signing with the Twins and getting a full no trade clause was important to him because he wants to be here long term. He wants his family to be here long term. So before I talk more about Buxton and the rest of how yesterday unfolded for Major League Baseball, let's play a couple clips from that news conference.
I'm going to do what I got to do to be that leader in the clubhouse and also on the field. And like I said, I know I keep reiterating this, but the ring is my biggest thing. We get to watch a lot of teams play in the playoffs, but tired of watching. I'm ready to get in the playoffs and let teams know what we're about. So I'm just ready to play baseball. For me, it was a big deal. Like I said, this is our home here. So the stability here for me and my family and my kids to, stay here, put them in school, let them play baseball, fishing, whatever it may be. The comfortability level was a big key for us, and staying here throughout my career was a big piece for me. So you combine those things, and we found that medium ground, and, we're happy. Like I said, this is the place we want to be, and it's nowhere else.
So like I said, should be a joyous day, should be a day of celebration. Twins keep one of their best players, obviously some risk there with his injury history, but when healthy, he was as good as anybody last season. He's been trending in the right direction the last few years, and now he is here for the next 7. Now, not necessarily short-lived. You can still be excited about the Buxton signing, but two other things emerged Wednesday that weren't necessarily in the win column, shall we say. The biggest one, of course, being Major League Baseball locked out its players, hours after Buxton's news conference. Don't know when this work stoppage will come to an end. Certainly time for them to get things figured out before things have a major impact. But, they've had 2 years where they knew this was looming. Couldn't that have been the deadline? Why do they have to take it to this next level where they have to lock out the players? Why couldn't they have figured this out sooner? It's gross. It's another example of the awful direction that baseball is headed right now. I've talked about this multiple times. The games are too long. The pace of play is embarrassing. And this is just one more thing where they can't figure it out, and baseball has fallen in relevance in my mind so far in the last 18 months to even a few years that I don't quite know what their plan for recovery is, because if they've lost people like me, if they're losing people like Patrick Royce, they are in real trouble. Not just, we're going to get the fans back when we figure this all out trouble, like maybe they were in the 90s. This isn't the 90s anymore. Maybe you could come back from missing a World Series in the mid-90s. I don't know what you're going to do right now as people start to phase out of baseball. That said, it's not gone yet. It's still a very popular league, a very popular sport, even if it's slipped quite a bit. Twins signed Dylan Bundy on Wednesday. Pitcher, long time with the Orioles, was with the Angels last season. Did not go well for him last year. I'm just looking up the numbers right now. 23 games, 19 starts, 90 innings pitched. A lot of home runs, guys. A lot of home runs. Over 20 home runs in just that many innings pitched. Yeah, 20 home runs in 90 innings pitched. Had a 6.06 ERA. Just looking at FanGraphs right now. Projected to have a 4.98 ERA next season and go 9-11 for the Twins. Quote from Derek Falvey, president of baseball operations, about Dylan Bundy, saying, "You look at 2020, I know it was a shortened season, but he did anything you could have asked of him, and I think this year he dealt with some of those injuries. Our hope is that we can get him healthy in pitching, and we can see a lot more of the 2020 version of Dylan over the course of a full season." It just speaks to me of classic Twins, we can fix this guy mentality. 6-3 with a 3.29 ERA in that shortened year. 2020 certainly good. 2016, 2017 not bad with Baltimore. Won a combined 23 games those years. ERAs just a bit above 4. If that's what you're getting from Dylan Bundy for $4 million plus a $1 million possible buyout next season, that's fine. I think that'd be pretty good, but problem is 3 of the last 4 years have had ERAs of 5.45, 4.74, and 6.06. Larger body of work recently suggesting it will trend poorly instead of trending well in this regard. So I don't really love the move. I'm sure it's not the last pitching move. However, it is the last pitching move for months because now we are in this lockout phase. So Twins scrambled, got one pitching move done before. We're probably going to be staring at a lockout of at least 2 months in my guess, and they can't do anything roster-wise until then. This pitching is still in disarray, and I don't think the Dylan Bundy signing solved much of that problem at all.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is playday.
Happy to be joined on Daily Delivery today by Ryan Hartman, leading goal scorer for the Wild this season, 12 goals, had 2 assists the other night in a win over Arizona. Second on the team in points, I believe, behind Mr. Kaprizov, who he's familiar with from playing with him quite a bit. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself? I'm
good, thanks. Thanks for joining me. We're talking on Wednesday, a day off for you, so very much appreciate your time. Let's just talk about the season at the jump. Like I said at the beginning, 12 goals. Not like you don't have goals in you, not like you haven't, you got close to 20 goals earlier in your career, but I don't think most people maybe anticipated this level of output from you so far this year. What's been working for you?
Kind of just about everything. I mean, pucks have been going in for the most part. The team overall is playing really well, and it's a lot easier to play when the team's playing well. We're playing with, I was going to say we're playing with leads, but that hasn't really been the case all year, but it's been better lately, which is a good thing. And, overall just a full, the team's rolling, and, we started off the year pretty hot, and, it was a lot better start than the previous year. So, we're just looking to keep that train rolling.
I believe, if I looked it up on Wednesday morning, as of Wednesday, at least, Wild led the league in goals. You lead the team in goals. I think you alluded to it a little bit, just a lot of people rolling right now. But the team speed seems to be an asset right now, just kind of up and down the lineup. Feels like there's a lot of confidence right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the last 2 weeks, we've been scoring a lot of goals. There's some games where we're giving up a little bit, but, we know how to score. We have that scoring up and down our lineup, that depth scoring, and I was my agent texted me after the game yesterday, is just saying how fun we are to watch, and I was telling him like I would hate to play us. It would be just the way we play. You got that Eck line. I mean, all four lines grind, and obviously all four lines have skill, but we work hard first, and we do really good things with the puck, and we're responsible, and would really hate to play a team like us.
Yeah, I agree. You guys have been fun to watch this season, and obviously you haven't been here for your whole career. You started with Chicago, a couple other stops along the way. Was when you played against Minnesota, back previously when you were an opposing team, was stylistically what differences can you point to between this team and maybe some of the Wild teams you played against in the past?
Yeah, I mean, it was always a tough building to play in. I remember, it was always cold. You're always coming in January, February. You either we always stayed in St. Paul. There's, like you said, we weren't really leaving the hotel much because of how cold it was. And, but overall, I mean, they were always a tough team. Like I remember playing against that Stahl, Parise. I'm trying to think who would have been the third winger or the other winger on that line, but they played so good low and behind the net. It was always the D would get it, put it behind the net, and Stahl would be behind the net with the puck and always be making plays. And sorry. And just kind of now it's just, we grind, we play hard, we play defensive style first. When we do lose games, it's mainly because of what we did and that we didn't play how we were supposed to play. And that's a reasoning to when we do lose games, which is, that's a great problem to have. We can control our own destiny. If we just play the right way, we're going to win a lot of hockey games.
Speaking of controlling your destiny, I'm just kind of curious about your journey to the NHL. I believe first player born in South Carolina to play in the NHL, but I don't know how long you lived there. It sounds like you grew up more in Illinois, but still it's an interesting distinction, not exactly a hockey hotbed. How did you get to this point?
Yeah. My parents both went to University of South Carolina. My mom's from down there. My dad's from Chicago. I was born down there. Probably spent the first 2 years of my life down there, and then actually lived with my cousin in Alabama for a short period of time while I think my parents were house hunting in Chicago. And then when we moved up there, when I was like 2.5, spent my whole life in Chicago, but it was honestly just the winters. It was, I was literally only there for when school started to when school ended, and obviously hockey season. And then the day school ended, which would have been, I don't know, June or May or whatever every year, I'd get picked up on the last day of school in the car, and the car would be packed. We'd drive down to South Carolina all the way until the day before school started. And that was every summer until I was 15, 16 years old. I didn't touch a hockey stick or play hockey. My dad didn't let me. It was time off, I guess. You look now, kids play, 12 months a year. I spent my summer months playing baseball, golf, fishing. I worked on a fishing boat down in South Carolina. Great. I mean, yeah, you can say I grew up in Chicago, but at the same time, I felt most of my childhood was at the beach and the golf courses down there.
I think you alluded to it just now, but I think that there's this push-pull between, getting on the ice as much as possible, but there's also a lot of research that says play other sports, get a break from your primary sport. You don't want to burn out. You want to still have that love for it when you go back to it. Is that kind of what you experienced by, like you said, not picking up a hockey stick for a lot of, for those entire summers?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You were talking about like studies and stuff. Like I know there's links to multi-sport athletes and single sport athletes to injury, and you're using different, hockey is such an interesting sport with your hips and your groins, and if you just do that for 12 months straight, like you're gonna have some wear and tear, and if you give yourself rest and you're running, you're swinging a golf, like it's completely different. And but like that fire, like you don't want it to burn out, like like I'm sure it has with some kids. I just remember after every summer just being so excited to start playing hockey again, and just being able to have to reignite that fire just by taking time off was great. And it just made every year, that much more fun. It's, looking back, it would be tough, as a kid. I'm sure I know a lot of kids do it. A lot of kids love the game of hockey, so do I. But to go through a whole summer of skating and all that, like I do it now, it's a job at the same time. But I obviously still do love it, and you miss the physicality. Like that's the biggest thing in the summer now is, you skate around, you do your little drills and shoot on goalies, and sometimes you don't even have a goalie to shoot on, and you miss the bumping and the physicality of the game. So. But the time off as a kid is definitely, I think, it's different for everybody, but for me, it helped a lot.
Things intensified, obviously, at a certain point. You excel in junior hockey. You get drafted by Chicago, which is your, essentially, where you grew up. I believe you grew up a Blackhawks fan to a certain extent. What's it like? I mean, it's got to be a dream to a certain extent to get drafted and play for the team you rooted for growing up, but I imagine there's also a certain amount of pressure that comes with that as well.
Yeah, I was a huge Blackhawks fan. I got to watch a lot of good players going through and grew up going to a lot of games. I got to watch Kane and Taves early in their career when they first got in the league and they were dominating. Obviously, they still are, but yeah, I remember I had my final, my last final in my freshman year of high school, 2010, and it was my Spanish final. And I didn't even look at a question. I just filled it out, and just so I can get downtown to the parade. Me and my buddy picked me up from school, and we drove down to Chicago, and was part of the sea of Blackhawk jerseys downtown on Wacker Drive, and then fast forward 3 years, I got drafted by them, and then fast forward another 2 years, I was on one of the buses for the parade. So it was just kind of a crazy five-year period. If I were to see myself 5 years before that, sitting down and cheering for these guys, and then being with them 5 years later.
I won't ask you the next question in Spanish. So it sounds like you didn't necessarily.
I would know a word.
Okay. I'm just kidding anyway. A couple more things for you, Ryan Hartman. Enjoying this conversation. I feel like players get to the NHL and everybody, pretty much anybody who's gotten this far scored a certain amount of goals. They were probably one of the best players on their team growing up, whether, whatever level it was. Then you get to the NHL and you kind of get this label or role put on you. It's not like you magically forget how to score goals, even if suddenly you get deemed a checking player or more of a defensive style player. Maybe how do you relate to that kind of idea? And maybe should we not be so surprised that someone who, scored at a pretty good clip in junior hockey and has had a fair share of NHL goals, has 12 goals and leads this team right now?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, everyone at the NHL level was, really good growing up, and that's the reason they're in the NHL. And sometimes they fall into roles that aren't necessarily goal-scoring roles, and they don't really have the opportunity sometimes to score, but it's obviously there in every guy that's in the NHL. Obviously, maybe with defensemen, it might be a little different, like a stay-at-home defenseman who prides in blocking shots and has probably been doing that his whole career, might not necessarily ever been a scorer. But I was thinking about it the other day, too. It was like, the longest I've ever been in a certain league was probably, 2 years. I played 2 years in the USHL with the US program, 2 years in the OHL, 2 years in the AHL. In those 2 years, you finally start getting comfortable. And then after those 2 years, you start moving up to the next level. And then you got to kind of reset and not necessarily learn the game, but the speed changes. And, now this is my, I remember 5th or 6th year now. It's the longest I've ever been in the league. And that comfortability of the game slowing down, and I've been here for a while now, and I'm coming up on 400 games, and the game just feels comfortable. And not that I haven't been adjusted for a while now, but it is the longest you've been in the same league your whole life. So definitely feel just really comfortable on the ice and aware of, a lot of situations that I might not have been early in my career.
One of the podcast listeners, friend of mine, goes by Chicken Fingers 69 on Twitter. I asked him if he had a question for you because he's a huge Wild fan, is very knowledgeable hockey guy as well. Wanted to know if you adjust your game. You've kind of been up and down with different lines on this team. Sometimes you play with Kaprizov, sometimes you're with Foligno, other scenarios. Do you adjust your game based on who you're playing with?
I try not to. Honestly, if I do, I feel like it hurts my game a little bit. I'm not the most skilled NHL player in the league, and when I go get up to some of these lines when I have in the past, there's been times where I try to match that, and that's just not what's going to make me successful. I think it's me staying and playing the way I play and getting the pucks and, getting in the forecheck and getting the puck to these skilled guys. And, they obviously have that skill for a reason. And then, when I get opportunities to shoot or score or, to make a play, it's so I think it's, I try to just keep my game where it is no matter where I'm playing.
Last thing, Ryan Hartman, what should we know about you off the ice? We can read biography, the brief bios they write, or you can read Wikipedia. But how do you describe yourself? When you're not just Ryan Hartman, the hockey player.
I don't know. I'm pretty laid back. I do a little bit of everything. I golf a lot in the summer. Free time, I don't do much. Maybe play some PlayStation or Xbox or whatever. I'm very outdoorsy. I hunt and fish, and it's tough with hockey. The season's right during hunting season, so I haven't been able to. Got to do it last year with the delayed season start, but it's usually in October, so I don't get to do much right now. But there'll be plenty of time for that later in life. But obviously, golf goes hand in hand with hockey. I spend 5 to 6 days a week at the golf course in the summer back in Chicago, and I travel for golf, go down to South Carolina for golf. It takes up a lot of my life, honestly, in the summers. So besides that, I think that's about it. Hockey player and, likes to be outside. I'm not inside very much.
Well, it sounds like a pretty good life and a pretty good season to date for both you and the Wild. Ryan Hartman, thank you so much for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your day off, and good luck the rest of the year, okay?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me.
Now, kids, I don't recommend skipping your Spanish exams to go to parades for your favorite teams. But that said, if a Minnesota team ever won another championship here, I would give you permission to maybe miss out on a little bit like Ryan Hartman did back in the day when he told that great story about, basically putting down fake answers to his Spanish final and getting out of there to get to the Stanley Cup parade for the Chicago Blackhawks. So really enjoyed catching up with Ryan Hartman, and I just hope you guys enjoyed everything he had to say as well. Happy to have Marcus Fuller back on Daily Delivery. It's been a couple weeks and several Gopher men's basketball victories since we talked, Marcus. I think at the beginning of the year, we kind of set things up saying this could be a struggle for Ben Johnson in his first season with the Gophers. Got to admit, Marcus, they're 6-0 right now. I know early December RPI doesn't mean that much, but they're number 12 in the RPI right now. And I got to admit, 6 wins is probably more than I thought they might win all season. What's going on here with this team that's got them to this point?
Yeah, I don't remember when we talked about the team struggling. I'm pretty sure that you said rebuild and I said undefeated 6-0 start. So
you did not say that, Marcus. You can try.
I'm going to go ahead and predict that. No, I think that obviously if you look at the RPI, I don't think they use RPI anymore. I think they've done away with that years ago. But we'll just go with that number 12 RPI and say that they're going to make the NCAA tournament as of now. But when you look at the start, I think all of us expected, there to be a couple losses at least in this first 6 games. You said 6 wins for the entire year. Was that your prediction?
I didn't even know if they'd win 6, honestly. Like, I just thought they were going to be really, really bad. I just looked at their roster and I was like, I just don't see how this comes together, especially as you're trying to install new systems, things like that. For them to be 6-0, I don't care who their first 6 opponents were. I'm beyond surprised, especially, at how they've won some of these games and, pulled them off in the final moments, kind of like they did against Pittsburgh the other night. And you were there for that.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the last few seconds of that game, first of all, they're not an offensive juggernaut. I mean, if you see some of the games that they've played, they're in the 50s, 60s. They're one of the lowest scoring teams in the Big Ten. But at the same time, like you said, I mean, they've been able to finish these games. If you look at the final seconds at Pittsburgh, Luke Lowe comes in. He inbounds the ball to E.J. Stevens. E.J. Stevens gets to the basket pretty easily, but he can't finish over a taller, more athletic defender. Puts it up off the backboard, it rolls off the rim, and Luke Lowe, who inbounded the ball, he has the instincts to follow his teammate's shot and rises up and puts it back in for the game winner. This is a team that ranked going into the Pittsburgh game last in Division I in offensive rebounding percentage, dead last, 358 teams. And partly is because Ben Johnson doesn't like crashing the offensive glass. He doesn't feel like he has the athletes or the size to do it very effectively, so they just don't do it. But also, I mean, like I said, that this team is not, one of the biggest and most athletic teams. And it showed versus Pittsburgh. They got out rebounded, but they got the rebounds that counted. The last 2 points of the game were second chance points. And, if you look at this team defensively, they're always going to put themselves in the game. They hold team opponents to 21% shooting from 3-point range, which ranks number 2 in the country, I believe, and number 1 in the Big Ten, obviously. And, if you get a chance to, keep the opponent from hitting a lot of threes, especially when you're playing mid-major opponents, that's how a lot of these upsets have happened this year. When mid-majors are playing up, they'll hit threes. What happens in the NCAA tournament a lot. And so if you can take that away from the opposing team, and they've actually been shooting pretty well from 3-point range this year, you're going to be in a lot of games. And then if you have the experience to make plays down the stretch, whether it be defensively, coming up with a key rebound or a shot or free throw, that's the difference in the game. 1 or 2 possessions, 1 or 2 points. And if you look at, this Pittsburgh game, if you look at the double overtime win versus Princeton, if you look at a couple of games where they let double-digit leads slip versus UMKC and also Western Kentucky, they might have, let these teams back in the game, but quickly they realized that, hey, we've done this before. Obviously, the UMKC was the first game. And once they did that, they realized that, hey, we're new. This is a new coach. We're a Big Ten team that nobody expected us to do anything, but we believe that we can win. And that was the biggest key. I think if they would have lost that first UMKC game, even if they would have played pretty well in the next 5 games, you would have seen a totally different outcome. But because they came back and they won that UMKC game, I'm sorry, they come back, but they lost the lead in that UMKC game. I think that they believed every other game after that no matter what happened, they could win down the stretch. And that's a huge thing.
And obviously, like you said, defense has been a big part of what they've done so far. I think you wrote about that a little bit in detail last week. I was talking about, like you just mentioned it again, the opposing 3-point percentage, very good, way up there in Division I and certainly ahead of the rest of the pack in the Big Ten. That can be a little bit of a volatile stat. They could kind of, teams will certainly shoot better than 21% for the season, so that will even out a little bit. That said, they do seem to have a level of defensive intensity and acumen that suggests that they could keep themselves in more games than I thought. When you're not particularly athletic or big, how are they such a good defense so far, aside from that, kind of outlier stat of opposing 3-point percentage?
Well, I don't expect it to be 21% when the season ends, but I think 3-point defense isn't necessarily always that your opponents don't shoot the ball that well. I mean, it really is a focus that they have. I mean, they actually, they pressure the ball quite a bit. And they really guard the 3-point line. You asked one of the reasons why they're better defensively. I think the scouting report. Dave Thorson, former De La Salle coach, who prides himself on ball pressure and defensive success at De La Salle, he does a scouting report. And I wrote a couple games ago that when he starts off the week shouting at the team, getting them to focus on the scouting report, and what kind of personality he has. He jumps out at you, eyes bulging. He'll get your attention even if you're falling asleep. And if you get the players to buy into the scouting report, that's huge. So a lot of times teams you'll see starting the game and the opponent will have success in an area where you knew they would. That's coaching. That's just not just personnel. That's coaching. The team was not prepared, and it feels like every game this team is really prepared to take away what you do best. They played Western Kentucky, who's an athletic, very big team that likes to go inside. Then the second game in Asheville, they played Princeton, who has a completely different offense, a lot of backdoor, very disciplined, half court. It was completely two scouts, and they had two of their best defensive games, for the most part in those games. So I think scouting is a huge thing. Game preparation is a huge thing, but it's also experience. 6 of their 7 players in their rotation are seniors. They played a lot of college basketball. So they've been taught well defensively. So they know how to move their feet. They know how to help defense. They know different places to be on the court for defensive rebounds, which again, they're one of the top defensive rebounding teams in the country and also in the Big Ten. Not very big, not very athletic, but they seem to be in the right place at the right time. Hence, Loewy's putback for the game winner. So I think experience, discipline with the scouting report, and just playing well together. Their chemistry. They do a lot of talking and communicating on the court. It's almost like they played together for 4 years. It kind of reminds me of some of the teams that my 6th grade son plays in boys traveling, when you look at the team and they're not the biggest and the most athletic, and all of a sudden, at halftime you're down double digits because they play well together. They know where one another's strengths and weaknesses are, and they try to make up for that by playing well as a team.
A couple things to that point. One being, how much of this do you think is sustainable once they start playing, a tougher schedule? They're going to face Michigan State here pretty soon, and the whole gamut of the Big Ten, even Mississippi State, their next opponent it seems like that should be a better test than they probably had yet this season. Certainly some of these attributes are transferable. How well do you think they will hold up against better competition?
That's a good point. You saw a lot of it in this Pittsburgh game. Pittsburgh's picked to finish last in the ACC. They're 2-5 this year. They've lost 3 games at home and 2 to mid-majors. So, it's great to get a win on the road, and you don't want to take anything away from their 6-0 start. But now is when they really play the big boys, literally. And, Mississippi State's got a 6'10", 250-pound center who's leading them in scoring and rebounding. Next to him in the front court is a 6'9" transfer from North Carolina, who was the ACC preseason player of the year at North Carolina last year, in Garrison Brooks. Also next to him is a 6'8" wing from Memphis, who a few years ago was a projected first-round pick, one of Penny Hardaway's top recruits with James Wiseman. So this is not just a bigger team like they played versus Western Kentucky. This is also a lot more talented team that really, other than their the egg or they dropped an egg against Louisville in the Bahamas. They're having a good season, Mississippi State. And they're playing at home. So I think, again, it's another road environment. I think it'll be a lot bigger more bustling environment than it was at Pitt. I think there's probably 500 people in the stands. And, it's an SEC game. This is not SEC football, but, Mississippi State, they've got Ben Howell in there, and I think he has a team that they feel like they can make the NCAA tournament. They need to prove it by beating Big Ten teams. They need to prove it by, handling opponent like Minnesota, who comes in undefeated, but at the same time, they're going to be favored in that game. Mississippi State will. So I like that test for them. And then when they come to play early in the Big Ten season, you got Michigan State. Tom Izzo has a team this year. It's a lot better than last year, playing like a team, more physical, and they play defense like Michigan State teams of old. And then they come back and they go on the road again, third time in 4 games, play at Michigan, defending Big Ten champions who have started off the season slow, but there's a reason why they're preseason favorite to win the Big Ten, even over Purdue, who's the number 2 team in the country right now. They've got a very good big man in Hunter Dickinson. And I think that's where you'll see the Gophers struggle, is they just do not have much in the post that can handle, some of these better big men in the country. And, John Hughley for Pittsburgh, I would say if he was in the Big Ten, he'd probably be in the middle of the pack of the big men. He had 25, he had 25 and 14 on Minnesota, including 16 straight points in one stretch that helped Pittsburgh take control of that game until the very end. So that's the area where I don't think that they can actually do much, but try to make sure that they stay out of foul trouble. Try to make sure, especially Eric Curry, is on the floor and he can give them some rebounds. He can give them some experience, and he can help them defensively as a team. Because I think, beyond Eric Curry, it's a pretty big drop off. Charlie Daniels has been playing about 12 minutes a game this year, and he's a physical presence, but he just doesn't have the experience playing against high major opponents to really help them.
Couple more things for you, Marcus. Again, I'm enjoying watching this team play way more than I thought I would. I want to hear from you. Who, the rotation is pretty tight. We didn't know a lot about many of these guys coming into the season. Anybody individually surprising you so far with, what they've been able to do, on the court for the Gophers this year?
I think Jamison Battle is by far, the individual that has taken this team to another level. If you look at what he did at George Washington, he averaged 17 points a game last year, and he's averaging 17 this year for the Gophers. So, yes, they haven't played high major competition. It's their first time versus Pittsburgh, but he's had some very big games, especially in the first half, and really in stretches. It seems like when they need a basket, when they need a bucket, he's their go-to guy. And really, if you want to continue to have success in the Big Ten and against better opponents, you're going to have a player that can just get you a basket to stop opposing teams' run. And it was a 9-0 run, I think, in the second half versus Pitt. They were down by 8, and all of a sudden, Jamison Battle is quiet, and he scores 8 straight points. And it's not like they didn't know it was coming.
Sure.
They knew it was coming. They just still couldn't stop it. I mean, he's 6'7", and he comes off a screen and he just pulls up, quick trigger. It's in the basket, and he's shot a little poorly from 3-point in the last few games. I want to say he started off the season strong, and now he's about 31% from 3. But I think that's because he's taken a lot of them. I think if he kind of slows down a little bit on the volume and maybe gets to the basket a bit more, you'll see that percentage raise a little bit. And Peyton Willis is kind of that second option. A lot of times he's the first option when Battle's not getting it going. But Peyton Willis has the ball in his hands this year, sort of like Marcus Carr did last year and the last couple of years. So he's called his number quite often when they need a bucket. And, the thing I like about Willis more than the last time around for the Gophers is he's actually getting to the basket more, not just settling for the jump shot. He's facilitating, off the pick and roll. Instead of pulling up all the time, he's trying to find his teammates. And that's really helped this team to have 2 solid double-figure scorers. And then every now and then you'll see a guy like E.J. Stevens, who really Ben Johnson trusted to take the last shot against Pitt. Didn't go in, but he actually got to the basket and got a good shot off. And also Luke Lowy, where, he's not a big time scorer, but defensively, I mean, he's been sliding in for Gabe Kalsher this year and become one of the best defenders in the Big Ten. They haven't had Big Ten play yet this year, but if just off the opponents that they've played, he's one of the best on-ball defenders out there. And, he really put a stamp on his game. He really puts a stamp on the game without scoring.
Last thing, Marcus, and I mentioned this on a podcast a couple days ago, but it feels like, by them starting 6-0 with a roster that was largely assembled through the transfer portal after so many of their guys left. And again, we don't expect them to sustain, an undefeated season. It does feel like it bodes well, though. It does indicate, at least early on, that this new coaching regime knows what it's doing. Is that you feel like you've seen evidence of Ben Johnson being a pretty good in-game coach so far?
Yeah, I think that preparation going into the game, like I said, is very good. I think finishing games, there's been situations where they've lost the lead or they've been trailing late in games where he's called a timeout and he's really gotten them, straight away. So I think, he's good at motivating. He's good at, preparing the team going into the game. And, I'm not just talking about Ben Johnson, this entire staff. I think Dave Thorson, Marcus Jenkins, and Jason Kemp, they work well together. And, one thing about Pitino, you saw that he had a lot of assistants come and go. And there was just a tough, really getting chemistry as a coaching staff. And I think it's really impressive that in his first year, he's not coached with any one of these guys. I mean, even Dave Thorson, as close as they've been for more than half his life, they've never coached before. But it was seamless, the transition, even in practices where, Thorson will be screaming and saying what he wants to say, but he'll give Ben Johnson the time to make sure that they know that it's his team. So I think the coaching staff definitely has this team prepared game in and game out. And I think that's been a huge thing for this team. And I think that's what you're going to see moving forward, because you talked about all the newcomers. Well, most of them are seniors. So we're going to have an entirely different team next year.
Absolutely. Well, it's been interesting to watch so far. Like we talked about, the competition gets much tougher now. I'll be interested. That Mississippi State game will be a pretty good indicator of, will they be able to hang with some of these bigger teams once they get into Big Ten play? Because it sounds like they've got a pretty good front court there. But like I said at the outset, like more than I've expected so far, and we'll see what they're able to do the rest of the way. Marcus, we'll check in again soon, especially as a Big Ten play gets underway here.
All right, thanks a lot. It's good to have the Gophers on the podcast.
Good stuff with Marcus. Enjoyed catching up with that on that team. Haven't talked as much Gopher men's basketball lately, but 6-0 against anybody, that is impressive. That said, like Marcus and I talked about to step up in class with the competition they're facing. ESPN has a metric called Basketball Power Index. Gophers number 88 in the BPI right now. Their next three opponents, Mississippi State, Michigan State, and Michigan, all in the top 30 of that. So they will see a much harder schedule going forward, and we'll see if they're able to do more this season than I expect them to as the competition gets better. Let's finish with the cooler. Wolves lost 115-107 at Washington on Wednesday night. No shame in that. Washington is off to a good start this season. This is one of those games where they didn't win. They're not going to win every game. We'll see if they can bounce back in their next game Friday night. Alan Horton, Timberwolves radio voice, will join me on Friday's show, by the way, to talk through this season. Wolves at Nets on Friday night should be a fun one there. See if they can get back over 500. One minor point on that game, kind of as D'Angelo Russell has gone this year, so have the Wolves. They lost the two games he missed earlier this year. In wins this season, he is shooting 36.6% from three-point range. In losses, 26.7% from three-point range. He had a bad game the other night. Only made 3 shots out of 18. And, as he goes, a lot of times he's kind of the X factor. He's not their best player. That's Karl Anthony Towns. He's not their second best player in terms of excitement, at least. That's Anthony Edwards. But D'Angelo Russell, good D'Angelo gives the Wolves a good chance to win. Bad D'Angelo, like we saw Wednesday night, gives them a good chance to lose. Russell, by the way, in that 3 for 18, just 1 of 12 from three-point range. Wolves shoot a lot of threes. He shot almost a third of them the other night. They shot 37 and made 11. So aside from D'Angelo Russell, they were 10 of 25 from three-point range, 40%. So D'Lo was certainly a drag on that percentage as well. But again, he's been good in a lot of games, and he could be right back at it against the Nets on Friday. And we'll be right back at it on Friday as well. Like I said, Alan Horton will join me on the show to talk Timberwolves, talk a lot of good stuff. Mark Craig will also join me for the weekly picks segment. Thanks for joining me here today on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. We'll see you again tomorrow.